Um, Hello, ma'am. So this is for a submission of a real component of IPRE subject. So we are doing a debate today with the four of us. That is me, Neha, Kamath, Arjun, Divyansh, and Avik. So we are doing it on the motion. This house believes that governments should prioritize universal access to healthcare over the protection of intellectual property rights for pharmaceutical companies. It means whether government should allow certain solutions or drugs being sold universally across a country, or should they allow the rights to to be to remain with the pharmaceutical companies, right? So we two people will be speaking for the topic and two people will be speaking against the topic. I'll be speaking for, along with me, Divyansh will be speaking for, and Avik and Arjun will be speaking against the topic. First, I will speak, and then Arjun will speak against. Then Divyansh will again speak for the topic. Then Avik will speak against the topic, right? So, why do we think this is wrong, right? Before we move on to the main arguments of why it is very important for universal access to healthcare, tell you what this actually means, right? What does universal access to healthcare mean? What does intellectual property rights to the pharmaceutical companies mean, right? What does universal access to healthcare mean, right? This refers to healthcare system where all citizens have equal access to essential medical services regardless of the socio-economic status or ability to pay. It means that irrespective of whatever background you come from, whether you can afford it, whether you can't, whether you like to remain in the accessible areas, all of that, irrespective of all of that, you will have equal access to healthcare, and this is the duty of the government to ensure that, right? It entails providing healthcare services that are affordable, accessible, and of high quality to everyone within the society. It means that whether you, whichever background you come from, you have equal right to it. Government will ensure that this is being taken, like undertaken, right? What does protection of intellectual property rights for pharmaceutical companies mean? This involves safeguarding the patents, trademarks, and copyrights of pharmaceutical companies, thereby granting them exclusive rights to produce and distribute their innovative drugs or medical treatments. That means that if a pharmaceutical company has come up with a solution to a disease or has come up with a drug for a certain disease, it means that they will continue to own the solution itself. They decide, they produce it. That is so definitely that, but they also decide who has access to it. Then they decide its distribution, where does it go, which parts of the country does it go to. All of it is something that they own, and will not be under the government, or will not be equally accessible to all, right? They have the ownership over that drug or over the solution itself. These protections are typically granted to incentivize innovation and investment in research and development within the pharmaceutical industry. A reason why this could be done is because it provides incentive for pharmaceutical companies to continue to do so. That is, they gain recognition and they gain a lot through it if it remains in their own right, rather than giving it out for universal access, right? Rather than allowing everybody to use it, so that anybody can misuse it or harm it. But we'll tell you why the why limiting these resources is much more harmful than allowing it to be more accessible to people, right? So the main argument that comes to our mind is that healthcare is a basic human right, right? The reason why we tell you so is because universal access to healthcare is fundamental to upholding human dignity and rights. Access to essential healthcare services is not a privilege but a basic human right. And it means that it is not something that only the privilege should be should have the right over, but every citizen, whoever you are, is is equally like has an equal right over it, right? This is the government's duty to ensure that every citizen of the country has the right over it, right? By prioritizing universal access over pharmaceutical companies' intellectual properties, governments can ensure that everyone, regardless of their financial situation, can access life-saving medications and treatments. Right? It means that whether you can afford it or not should never be an issue in terms of healthcare. Right? Healthcare is something that everybody uh, like should be should have access to, and is something that where is a part of human right. You cannot limit certain resources to only a certain group of people only because they have the means to do so, and this is something that the government should ensure that everybody gets equal right to it, right? The impact of this is that this approach promotes social justice and reduces health disparity within society. It leads to overall public health outcome, as individuals have timely access to preventive care and necessary treatments, ultimately resulting in a healthier population and increased productivity. It means that if everybody in the country has equal access to it, your country as a whole is living a healthier life, right? It means that every person in your country has better healthcare facilities, has better healthcare, like access to like all the people. It means that all your countrymen live healthier lives, which is very important, right? So that you don't go through outbreaks of many diseases or something, because it's very important for a country to ensure that these outbreaks are curtailed and its citizens are not affected in a bad way, right? So providing good healthcare, quality healthcare to all, irrespective of whether you can afford to do so, it's very, very important because it's a basic human right. Right? So, and we also speak to you about the impact of this, that is, how it helps in combating, like avoiding disease outbreaks or anything like that for a country as a whole, and not just to certain group of people who can afford to do so. The second major thing is how it's very important during medical health emergencies, right? During public health emergencies such as pandemics or outbreaks, which we recently went through one, which was COVID-19, prioritizing universal access to healthcare becomes imperative. In such situations, rapid access to affordable medications and vaccines is crucial for containing the spread of disease and mitigating their impact in society. As we saw in India, that after a certain point, vaccines are given out to free. We see that if this was not something that was given, a lot of uh, like a lot majority of the country would have never been able to access this, right? Because of their financial conditions, or even like they couldn't come to like major cities to get these vaccines, etc., right? If government does not ensure a proper distribution of equal distribution of resources or medical facilities to all, understand that people will never be able to combat spread of very viral diseases, right? We saw that in a country like India, it's only through providing equal and like unbiased resource distribution, we saw how a country like India could mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 and could come out of it, right? It's very important to it's a very important case study when we see about how universal access to uh, healthcare is very, very important. The impact of this is that by removing barriers to access and allowing for widespread distribution of essential medical resources, governments can effectively respond to public health crises, saving lives and reducing the economic burden associated with healthcare emergencies. We might see that now, if government takes timely measures to provide equal healthcare to all, it means that you are able to combat diseases like COVID-19 easily, rather than keeping vaccines for like only limited group of people who can afford it. Say make vaccines like only you can only use it when you pay. Then a majority of the people in a country like India will never be able to like get access to these vaccines if it was paid or something like that. And then the after effects aftermath of it will be so bad, because all of this falls on government, because they could not take care of the people. You will have so many outbreaks and so many versions of the disease coming up if you don't take timely action towards it, right? So it's very important to ensure that on the government, it's very important to ensure that you give equal and timely access to all these people, right? Which is why we'll tell you that when you limit resources, when you limit these solutions or drugs to the pharmaceutical companies themselves and not to the government, it becomes very, very biased, and it could lead to a very messy situation in a lot of countries, even in a country like India. But now the opposition will come up and tell us that what this providing of access leads to is that pharmaceutical companies now don't have any incentive to like work in this field, right? Because when they have the right, they have a lot of like obviously they have the right over the sale of drugs, where they have the right over the distribution of drugs. But now when you make it universal, they don't have that much right, and they don't have any incentive to continue to be in this field, right? We'll tell you why that is not, why that is untrue. The promotion of innovation competition still exists. Prioritizing universal access to healthcare does not necessarily hinder innovation within the pharmaceutical industry. In fact, it can stimulate innovation by encouraging competition and development for more affordable generic medications. Now that you are providing to a greater number of people, a larger group of people, different types of people, there will always be competition among pharmaceutical companies to make it much more affordable, which also is very good for these consumers themselves, right? So there are better versions, cheaper versions of it coming up, so that it can be more affordable for the people, and this also drives some pharmaceutical companies to make it more affordable, because if a treatment something so pricey, people who cannot access will never be able to do so. And in country like India, there are a lot of people who don't have access to um, like affordable medications, right? So in such a situation, we understand that competition is very important. But where these pharmaceutical companies come into the picture and try to make healthcare much more affordable. Hence, the impact of this is that increased competition can drive down drug prices, making essential medications more accessible to a broader segment of the population. Additionally, by focusing on innovation that addresses unmet medical needs rather than solely maximizing profits through patent protection, the pharmaceutical industry can contribute to a significant advancement in healthcare. Like I said, that it will help these pharmaceutical companies to meet like other medical needs rather than just thinking about making money or making maximizing profits through patent protection. Other points will be told by my co-speaker, that is Divyansh. Thank you.
My name is Arjun Balaji. I'll be speaking against the motion that government should prioritize universal access to healthcare over the intellectual property rights protection of pharmaceutical companies. So essentially, healthcare is a fundamental and basic right that every nation owes its people, right? As side opposition, we accept this fact, but so is the protection of your ideas, your businesses, your trade secrets, and things that you spend billions of dollars and years on for developing, right? These are something that's fundamental to how society itself works, and it's very important that these sort of intellectual property rights, which are sort of the pillars of society itself, are upheld as we develop things like universal access to healthcare, right? Now, describing what is the world that would look like if you are only focusing on universal access to healthcare and you remove any sort of intellectual right like property rights protections, right? Inside like affirmatives world, right, you're going to have a world where people don't essentially like have any sort of protection of their businesses, right? So like Pfizer or any sort of large pharma company could spend billions of dollars and they have to release the formulas for everything, right? So any sort of like businesses could reverse engineer this and take all the hard work that these companies have put in over like so over many years, and all the money that they've spent on would just go to waste because every single one of their competitors will just get access to everything that they've done, right? Now this is fundamentally problematic for any sort of world because obviously you don't have the necessity to have any competition anymore, right? Because anyone can steal your ideas and steal your work, so nothing is like binding or nothing's protecting against people stealing your stuff, right? So if for side opposition to simply win this debate, right, if we prove that universal access to healthcare is not related to protection of any IPR or like any sort of if removal of these IPR is like isn't going to be beneficial for universal access to healthcare, we win this debate, right? Because we are simply describing that you don't need to remove intellectual property rights protection, which is a fundamental right guaranteed by any sort of sovereign government. If without removing this right, you can still improve universal access to healthcare, and the goal is still achieved that people are getting access to healthcare, right? Our arguments are twofold, right? First argument: protection of intellectual property rights is a fundamental like right for any sort of government, for any sort of sovereign nation, and for any sort of functioning of a business world within that country, right? The argument is twofold, right? Firstly, a company deserves to protect their secrets that they've spent years and years developing, right? This is very very straightforward because obviously giving this away for free doesn't make sense in a capitalistic competitive society. Giving this away for free doesn't make much sense because you spend so much money developing it, right? And in any sort of competitive like business environment, you deserve to have credit for the things that you have developed, right? This is not limited to just large pharma companies. It's also like smallest pharma companies which are inventing new medicines and new sort of things that are pushing the envelope and trying for newer medicines and better things for innovation in the pharma industry itself is going to be an overall positive impact if this still continues, right? Now, removal of any sort of intellectual like property rights, like any sort of protection that you're getting from it, is going to like push people away from driving this innovation because it's going to be like you will get it for free or you'll just not your idea will get stolen, right? So people are not going to be willing to spend a lot of time or a lot of money on this anymore, which is fundamentally problematic for any sort of larger ecosystem. And obviously healthcare as a whole becomes worse because people are not investing in the innovation of healthcare anymore, right? Second thing is it gives confidence to invest in R&D, right? Because if your ideas are protected, it'll give you a competitive competitive advantage in the in the system itself, in against your competitors and people who are also developing similar things, if that gives you that competitive edge, investors will put in money behind the R&D because your idea is protected, right? Because you're going to have a competitive edge, a competitive advantage over the market, and you're going to get a larger market share, right? So obviously this will drive better innovation and better healthcare overall, right? So this obviously cannot happen inside affirmatives world because you're removing any sort of protection for IPR and claiming that it helps universal healthcare, right? That now the second argument is exactly that, right? Instead of removing any fundamental right such as protection against intellectual property theft, right, which is a fundamental right guaranteed by any sort of sovereign nation under any sort of reasonable constitution, your intellectual property should be your own, right? So if without removing this, there are still alternatives to improve universal access to healthcare, right? This looks like you like lowering drug costs, right? In when you regulate drug costs itself, that also guarantees access to healthcare, right? We recognize that healthcare is very important, and access to healthcare is even more important, right? For especially for all sorts of communities, all sorts of people, being able to access healthcare is a very fundamental right for any country, and very important for any sort of nation and society to take seriously. This can be possible without removing any fundamental right like IPR, right? Any sort of fundamental IP like rights, or any sort of, without breaching like any person's dignity and stealing their idea, right? So you can do that by lowering drug costs. Simply lowering drug costs would ensure that everyone can buy the drug, and sort of solves the problem, right? Without removing any intellectual property protection against intellectual property theft, without removing without violating anyone's dignity, you can still ensure access to healthcare by lowering drug costs, right? Secondly, you can also improve hospitals in different areas, and increase like access to hospitals itself, right? This also encourages and ensures access to healthcare, right? Because this is a very important point, because you don't have to breach this intellectual property rights threshold and steal someone's idea for access to healthcare, right? Access to healthcare can happen in so many ways, right? If you ensure there are more number of hospitals existing, it just means that people have access to these hospitals, right? And regulating drug costs, regulating medication costs, and regulation overall healthcare costs, and giving better like free healthcare or even subsidized healthcare for people is going to increase this universal healthcare and going to like increase the benefit for people, right? So fundamentally, in the first speech, we proved that like objectively we have other alternatives instead of violating any person's intellectual property, right? Without stealing their property, without breaching the threshold and taking something that's not yours, right? So you're protecting these IPRs also ensure better innovation in any sort of medical system or any sort of society as a whole, because you're going to be driven to invest more in R&D, because it gives you a competitive advantage, right? On a more objective scale, even if people are not doing this for a social reason, they also have a business reason to invest in innovation in healthcare, right? And you can regulate this by just regulating the drug costs, right? If you keep drug costs regulated such that everyone can access it, that simply solves the problem that this motion is trying to solve, right? That simply gives you that answer that you're looking for, that you ensure universal access to healthcare by simply proving the fact that by simply giving access by lowering drug costs and giving increasing number of hospitals within any sort of country, that simply ensures that you get better access to healthcare. Also, you can give free and subsidized healthcare for different communities by different like economic thresholds. Obviously, those people are going to have better access to healthcare if you lower the price overall, right? So those are ways that you can solve this problem without stealing someone's intellectual property, or taking someone's dignity, and also making sure that there's an overall competitive edge in the market as a whole. For those reasons, I think side opposition takes this debate.
Hi, my name is Divyansh Shahi, and today I'm going to talk about the claims and mechanisms and how would they impact over the humanity. So the first claim is prioritizing universal access to healthcare over the protection of intellectual property rights for pharmaceutical companies. That can help to ensure that medical research is conducted in the best interest of humanity. Now, talking about its mechanism, by prioritizing universal access to healthcare, governments can actually provide incentives for medical research. These also prioritize human well-being rather than the commercial interests of medical centers or organizations. Now, this can be achieved through policies such as research funding allocation, uh, which is based on scientific merit rather than the profitability, and strict regulations on the conduct of medical research that ensure that it is conducted ethically and in best interests of humanity. Now, talking about what impact this particular mechanism will have on humanity is that ensuring medical research is that it is conducted in the best of humanity can help to promote transparency and accountability in the in the medical industry. This can also ensure scientific progress that is directed towards improving human well-being. So that was for the first claim. Now the second claim would be prioritizing universal access to healthcare over protection of intellectual property rights for pharmaceutical companies can also help to address broader social and economic issues. Now, what would be the mechanism for it? By providing such universal access to healthcare, governments can work to address broader social and economic issues that contribute to poor health, such as poverty, inequality, or poor living conditions. This can be achieved through initiatives such as investing in public health and social services, promoting healthy lifestyles and behaviors, and addressing systematic issues that may contribute to poor health, such as environmental pollution or inadequate housing. Now, what would be the impact that it would had that it would have on the on humanity is that addressing broader social and economic issues can help to promote overall health and well-being, as well as reducing healthcare costs in the long term. It can also help to reduce social and economic inequalities, as individuals and communities with poorer health, I'm sorry, with poorer health may be more likely to benefit from those interventions. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to speak against the motion that governments should prioritize universal access to healthcare over the protection of intellectual property rights for pharmaceutical companies. So, starting off, I would like to say that intellectual property rights serve as the bedrock for encouraging innovation in the pharmaceutical sector. When companies invest vast resources into development of new drugs, they do so with the expectation that their intellectual property will be protected. So this protection not only ensures that a return of investment for these companies, is there, and it also provides the necessary incentive for them to undertake the risky and costly process of discovering and bringing new drugs to the market. So there's an added incentive for them, though they cannot, bring new products into the market when they don't see an added incentive like an intellectual property right, which gives them a sense of ownership to their product. So there is more to it than just profit for for the pharmaceutical companies. So the second thing that I'd like to say is that without the protection of intellectual property rights, pharmaceutical companies would face a daunting challenge in recouping their substantial research and developmental costs. This in turn would stifle innovation, as companies may be less inclined to invest in groundbreaking research if they cannot safeguard the results of their research. So, in the absence of strong intellectual property rights, the incentive for the private sector to pioneer new treatments and find new medications diminishes significantly, leaving the society without the benefit of medical advancements. So, obviously, if you take the example of how companies came up with the vaccines during COVID-19, you could see how companies were competitive enough to bring out the new variants of the vaccines so that they could ensure that the pandemic did not cost way too many lives. So there is a sense of competitiveness that the pharmaceutical companies have among themselves, which ensures that you know the uh, which ensures that the usage of intellectual property rights is necessary. So uh, the next thing that I would like to say is that the protection of intellectual property rights is intricately linked to the delicate balance between fostering innovation and maintaining a competitive market. By safeguarding these rights, governments encourage a competitive pharmaceutical industry that can drive down costs through competition, leading to increased efficiency and accessibility for consumers. If we were to prioritize universal access to healthcare over intellectual property rights, we risk undermining the very system that has propelled the pharmaceutical industry to develop life-saving drugs and treatments. So somewhere there could be a trade-off, where you if you prioritize universal health care, there is not much for pharmaceutical companies to dig into in terms of research, or like they don't see the purpose in finding new drugs, new medications, and there is no scope for research for them when they don't see a sense of ownership for their own products. So it is essential to acknowledge that intellectual property rights contribute not only to the financial success of pharmaceutical companies but also to the overall well being of the society. By ensuring a robust system of intellectual property protection, governments can promote an environment where companies are motivated to continually push the boundaries of medical research, resulting in better healthcare outcomes for all. So, in conclusion, while universal access to healthcare is undeniably a laudable goal, we must not overlook the crucial role that intellectual property rights play in driving innovation and progress within the pharmaceutical industry. It is through a balanced approach that prioritizes both universal access and the protection of intellectual property rights that we can truly achieve sustainable and groundbreaking advancements in healthcare. So, yeah, thank you.